Senator, very good to be talking to you. To the GST, first of all, when Malcolm Turnbull foreshadowed the idea of putting a floor under the GST in the hope of settling a dispute with Western Australia in particular, your Premier in Tasmania, Will Hodgman, said he would fight this tooth and nail. You'd have to be happy with the news that this is years away rather than something that's going to happen imminently, something that would cause Tasmania to suffer in the short term anyway.
Well, look, absolutely. Any change to the GST, and myself and my Tasmanian Liberal Senate colleagues made the same comment as the Tasmanian Premier Will Hodgman, and that was that any change to the proposal to how to distribute GST shouldn't leave Tasmania any worse off. So, yep, absolutely. The statement that GST changes won't be taking effect for some time is a welcome one, but whatever happens on that front, myself, my Tassie Liberal Senate colleagues and the Tasmanian Government stand shoulder to shoulder to ensure that Tasmania is no worse off under any proposed change.
It does sound from the letter sent to Erica Betts and also the indications of what the Prime Minister is now saying to the states and territories that this could be a long way away rather than something to be dealt with immediately. In a sense, do you think that the government is hoping that the West Australian economy in particular will recover somewhat, its revenues might get in better shape, and also that the next judgment by the Grants Commission about the distribution of the GST will start to favour Western Australia a bit more than it has as it's come off the mining boom, that it's effectively off the agenda rather than that it's an immediate priority for the government?
Well, I think what this is another example of the Prime Minister doing what is right of any political leader, and that is taking time to ensure that whatever changes, significant changes like this relating to the carve-up of GST, are done in a proper and thorough manner. So the consultation needs to take place. That will take time. I'm not sure whether there are other elements added to the Prime Minister or the Treasurers or the Commonwealth Grants Commission's thinking on this, but the fact that they're taking the time to consider all the potential changes and the implications they may have for each of the states and territories across Australia. So I think it is a hallmark of a mature government when time is taken to examine what ramifications come about as a result of significant changes such as these. So I'm looking forward to participating in the discussion, as I'm sure the Tasmanian government is, as is Colin Barnett's government in Western Australia.
You mentioned Colin Barnett. He is not going to be, well, I should put it this way, it's not going to be very helpful to his election prospects, this news. He's already under pressure, according to the opinion polls, and indeed faced a leadership challenge in the last week. This is not going to help his prospects, is it?
Well, what I can say of Colin Barnett and the fact that there is a coalition government in Canberra is you've got a better chance of having a cooperative relationship between two coalition governments. They are two very mature political leaders who want the best for their jurisdictions. Now, I'm not going to commentate on whether a delay in a decision will be helpful or not to Colin Barnett, but what I do know is that Colin will still stand up and be the best leader that Western Australia can possibly have out of the choices before the Western Australian people. So, look, I don't think it will do him any damage, and I think he'll hold his own very well in the coming Western Australian election.
Now, to a story in the News Corp Sunday newspapers today, leaked Medicare documents revealing that patients who don't process their claims online are facing long delays. Medicare was a significant problem for the government during the recent election campaign, no more so than in Tasmania. You'd have to be disturbed about this news, which your constituents are not going to like.
Look, I've seen those reports. I've also seen the comments from Minister Alan Tudge with regard to assurances around the services provided to those people who need them, those who don't access the digital services and those who prefer to lodge their claims face-to-face, and I take some comfort from those. Certainly on behalf of my constituents, and you talk about the impact of the issues around Medicare in the Tasmanian election campaign in July, I'll be standing up for my community when it comes to access to services. We already did that in Tasmania when there was a prospect of a local service centre being closed, and Alan Tudge, who listened to me as a representative, or almost a representative of my community, and another candidate at the election, and reversed the decision to close down that centre. So look, I have every confidence that if problems do actually arise, and leaked documents are one thing, I've not seen them, and I always hold those things with a little bit of scepticism, I suppose you could say, but I'll always stand up for my community to make sure that if there is a problem with access to services, that they are addressed and resolved, and I'm sure that many of my colleagues across the country would say the same thing. But as I say, I have absolute faith in Minister Tudge and his ability to deliver services consistent with the expectations of the Australian people.
Do you think the government needs to think pretty carefully about closing shop fronts, in particular because it's a disturbing development for older voters, people who tend to use medical services more frequently anyway, and they're not, many of them, as confident about dealing with these sorts of things online as they are in having face-to-face contact?
Look, I think the government needs to make any decision with regard to the rationalisation of services, if they're going to do that, by consulting widely and thoroughly with the community. The fact is a decision was made, and I think a bad one, to do a certain thing with a certain centre in Tasmania. The community were up in arms. I was pleased to, along with the community, stand up and say, hang on, no, this is not the right outcome, and we don't think it'll work properly. And as I say, as a result, the Minister reversed the decision, and I understand it was the first decision he made as the new Minister. So look, I think it's just about consultation and understanding what a community needs. There's a million ways to skin this cat, and sometimes it's a combination of services or co-location with other shopfront services. So we just have to look at it through a different prism, but fundamentally it's about consultation and understanding what the community needs.
Immediately after the election, Malcolm Turnbull acknowledged that the government does have a problem, the coalition does have a problem in terms of promoting its message and gaining the public's confidence in relation to Medicare. Do you think that examples like this are likely to make it difficult to regain the public's trust through this term of government and into the next election?
Look, I don't think so, Jim. I think what we have to do as a government, me as a backbencher along with all of my Liberal and National colleagues across the country, we have to listen. That's how we earn the trust of the people that elect us to these positions. In relation to this issue or any other issue, we have to go out, we have to understand what the community wants. That's how we earn their trust. There'll always be leaked documents, there'll always be claims from the opposition, there'll always be these sorts of things going on, which are never helpful, but at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, and that is a better future for our country, better services to be provided to the Australian people, and as I say, each of us in Parliament need to go out, need to listen, and to take back to the Minister and other decision makers in Canberra what exactly that is and what's best for our communities.
Another issue, Social Services Minister Christian Porter is foreshadowing big changes in the way in which welfare could be delivered in Australia into the future. Tasmania has a particular interest in this issue. You have an unemployment rate higher than states on the mainland. People tend to be unemployed for longer, more people on benefit. Do you think that Tasmania needs special consideration as far as this is concerned as the government proceeds down this path?
I'm not so sure about special consideration. I think the points you make are quite right, and that we do have certain issues in Tasmania that we need to deal with. I think the conversation that Christian Porter is embarking on having is an appropriate one in terms of making sure that our social welfare system is robust and won't buckle under pressure in the years to come. With regard to the circumstances in Tasmania, I think along with the Tasmanian Liberal government, the best thing we can do is to create employment and to encourage people off long-term welfare and into jobs. I will be participating in any way possible to ensure that the Tasmanian view is heard by the Minister as he moves forward in embarking on any sort of reform. As I say, I think the conversation's an appropriate one to have, and I'm encouraged by what that might mean in terms of dealing with the issues of intergenerational welfare dependence and the like in the state of Tasmania.
Mr Porter's identified 3 groups as being at particular risk of being caught in a welfare trap, that is, getting into the on benefit and never getting off. They are young carers, parents under 18 and some students, with the unemployment rate in Tasmania traditionally higher than the mainland. There are going to be proportionally more of those people in those categories in your state. That does suggest that great care will be needed as the government progresses to make sure that these people are not, in some sense, stigmatised and by any changes that do occur as the government reforms the welfare system.
Yes, look, absolutely you are right. There will be a higher proportion of people affected. There's no denying that. I suppose the one thing you and I could probably both agree on, Jim, is that no one wants to see people who are in genuine need penalised unfairly as a result of any reforms. And that's something I'll be taking to the table. This is not about those who are in genuine need. It's about helping those who can go to work because they should work, and assisting those people to get into the workforce. Because at the moment, as has been identified, there are long-term welfare recipients. There is the issue of intergenerational welfare dependency. We should be assisting those people who can work to go to work. That's what this is about. And I agree, high care needed to ensure that people who genuinely need that welfare support should get it. But those who don't genuinely need it, then we should be doing what we can to assist them to get into a better life by way of work.
Senator Duniam, thank you very much. Do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Jim. Always a pleasure.